Well, so here I am yet again making another quick wee video to highlight the S&P's malevolence, which is becoming a fucking daily occurrence at this point. So, the latest episode here in Rainbow Unicorn Land comes from Shirley Ann Somerville, who looks like a rabid bulldog, if you ask me. But I'm not here to judge, but I will be rather nasty when these pieces of shit are the ones that are implementing policy within our country. So this is an old article from her where she describes herself as a lifelong passionate feminist, also a strong supporter of trans rights and equality. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, folks. So no. We're here to talk about what she's come out with and said in the past few days, and that is to highlight colonial past to tackle racism in Scotland. Shirley Ann Somerville. The Education Secretary suggests a more inclusive curriculum in response to concerns about racist incidents in school. Now, what is a racist incident? Well, according to the Scottish Government, on their own fucking website, a racist incident is any incident which is perceived to be racist by the victim or any other person. So a bystander could perceive something that could be entirely innocent. Whatever it may be, there you go, that's a racist incident. So you have to bear that in mind. That doesn't essentially mean that racism is rife. That just means that racist incidents, quote unquote, are rife. It's all about perception. In this day and age, what does racism mean anyway? Well, you be the judge. I don't know. Anyway, so the Scottish curriculum must become more inclusive and address issues such as the country's colonial past, Education Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville has said in Parliament. She was responding to concerns about the number of racist incidents, which again is merely perceptions, in Scottish schools and called for urgent action. Miss Somerville said work was ongoing on how to improve existing anti-racist education because, as we know, the SNP are planning to adopt an anti-racist curriculum. That was part of their manifesto. They were elected essentially on that promise. Well, to be honest, it was more about independence if you ask me, but nonetheless, that's becoming a reality here in Rainbow Unicorn Land now. Allegations from some anti-racist so-called experts that they're not going far enough because it's not anti-white enough, but anti-racism is simplistically anti-white by its very fucking nature. Anyway, the secretary, or education secretary, said curriculum reform was being looked at very closely to ensure that the curriculum is inclusive, that it recognises, for example, Scotland's colonial past, and that it respects the identities of young people and supports them on their journey through school. Respects the identities of young people. I mean, this is getting to a point now where it's becoming unbearable. You go to school to learn your ABCs. You go to school to get qualifications that are supposedly, in theory, to help propel you into a career at some point in your adult life. You're not there to learn about identity politics. You're not there to be taught about inclusion and diversity. You're certainly not supposed to be there to have your history tarnished. But that's exactly what the SNP intend to do. And they proclaim that in doing so will eradicate the evils of racist incidents. Tackling racism in schools. Teaching about colonial oppression. Miss Somerville was responding after Alexander Stewart, a Conservative MSP from Mid-Scotland and Fife, asked the Rainbow Unicorn government what its response was to a report from Show the Racism the Red Card charity, which highlighted that more than 2,000 incidents of racism had been reported in schools over the previous 3 years. Somerville said that the government is clear that there is no place for racism in our schools and is committed to addressing and tackling all forms of bullying, including on the grounds of race. Adding that in 2019, with local authorities, body COSLA, as well as authorities and teaching unions, the government had started a new national approach to the recording and monitoring of bullying in Scottish schools, which enables schools and local authorities to monitor all reported incidents of racist bullying and take all appropriate actions. Mr. Stewart, speaking in the Parliament yesterday, said that data from Show Racism the Red Card's consultation with 700 teachers around Scotland showed that nearly half of teachers were aware of a pupil or pupils expressing negative attitudes relating to skin colour, while 61% expressed a lack of confidence about educating pupils on anti-racism, and just under a quarter had received training on the subject. Training on the subject of anti-racism. Ugh. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these people that condones bullying in any shape or form. It's disgusting, you know. As a child in primary school, I was bullied myself for several years because I came from an area which wasn't in the catchment area for the school that I went to, so I was bullied for that reason. Bullying is disgraceful. I don't condone it at all, but like, I don't understand why bullying in school then somehow justifies promoting and implementing anti-racist policies, promoting reforming the education system to implement anti-racist policies and anti-racist academic or curriculum resources, etc. I don't see how bullying in any way justifies completely re-educating teachers so they know and they're confident to talk about fucking anti-racism, because again, it's these buzzwords. Anti-racism is not what it says on paper. It's not what it means. You know? It's anti-white. It's critical race theory, for fuck's sake. Those are serious and worrying statistics, he said, given that 85% of respondents said that tailored anti-racism workshops would be beneficial for all concerned. What urgent action can the government take to ensure that happens? Ms. Somerville said in response that the race equality and anti-racism in education program is leading work in this area, which includes school, leadership and professional learning as one of its 4 strands. Now, of course, what is that? Well, the Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education Programme Stakeholder Network Group. The government's Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education Programme was established in response to the significant amount of correspondence received by the Deputy First Minister as part of the BLM fucking movement. And one of the recommendations made by the COVID-19 ethnicity expert group seeking to include the teaching of black history in the curriculum. What the fuck has COVID-19 got to do with black history? Non-existent black history in Scotland, of course, but of course we was kangs and shit. At the end of 2020, officials in Learning Directorate, Education Scotland and the Equality Unit undertook a series of engagement sessions with education and race equality stakeholders. These fucking stakeholders, they're everywhere. They're so prevalent, but never are they named. To gain a better understanding of what the challenges are in terms of race, non-existent inequality and racism in schools. Because there's not enough BAME teachers, by the way, which we're coming to. At the beginning of 2021, the Deputy First Minister and Minister for Older People and Equality, Christina fucking McKelvey, by the way, that fat, overweight feminist who wants Scotland to atone for its racist past, brags about going on the Glasgow Slave Walk and loves to tell us all that Glasgow's built on the back of slaves, and she even talks about fucking reparations while she stands in Parliament on many occasions with a pussy hat. Nonetheless, met a number of stakeholders in order to listen to their suggestions for addressing race equality in schools. The programme's government consists of a small programme board with representation from the Scottish Government's Learning Directorate and Race Equality team, and a larger stakeholder network group. The Race Equality and Education Stakeholder Network Group has been established with the central aims of identifying measures which will address race inequality, which remains evident in schools because there's not enough BAME teachers, working with marginalised groups, anyone that's not white, and individuals to ensure that young people from all, of course, well there you go, spelling it out for me, from all minority ethnic backgrounds who experience so-called non-existent race inequality have their voices heard and can feed into the decision making, because it's all about what the BAMEs fucking want. Advising on potential changes in practice and also on concrete short, medium and long-term actions to support the desired outcome. Outcomes being the operative word there. It's not equality of opportunity anymore, it's equality of outcome, which is equity, not equality, which is that as a result of an anti-racist approach and culture of racial literacy amongst all school staffs and pupils, no minority ethnic child, young person, teacher or member of staff will experience race inequality in a school setting. Define race inequality. You can't, because it's shit. The group will be an action and outcomes focused one, examining the key drivers of so-called systemic non-existent race inequality in schools, how barriers which do not but they claim still exist can be removed, and how good practice can be built upon, because we love licking the boots of BAMEs. The group will bring their different viewpoints together with evidence to develop a set of actions which address race inequality, non-existent, in schools across 4 distinct areas. And they go on to say curriculum reform, racist incidents and bullying, diversity in the teaching profession and educational workforce, and school leadership and professional learning. And here's a fucking list of all their members, all these malevolent pieces of shit. However, I have kind of digressed. So anyway, she, as I said, the tangent that went on there is, she said in response that the race equality or quality and anti-racism in education programme is leading work in this area. Going on to say, It aims to ensure that Scotland's professional educators are confident and empowered to promote equality and foster good relations, and importantly, to identify, prevent, and proactively deal with racism if they see examples of it. Define racism. Define it at this point. You know, they're going about microaggressions and shit like this. There's an article the other day that I posted on my Telegram channel, and it was on about racism in Dundee University, if I'm not mistaken, and they actually had the audacity within the article to bring up microaggressions. I mean, this is where we're at now. BAME gets rubbed up the wrong way and it's fucking racism. It is important that we ensure that school leadership and professional learning is further developed, and that we also increase the diversity in the teaching profession so that it further reflects the Scottish population, just as we wish to see in the Parliament. There's this malevolent bullshit again. So they want to eradicate, this is what they claim, they want to eradicate racism by shoehorning in BAME teachers, because that somehow will justify, no, that somehow will eradicate racism. Don't understand it. They'll go on to talk about the fact that BAMEs don't see themselves, but yet, well, they will simultaneously, tell you that we're all one, we're all the same, you know, we should be colorblind, etc. You know, but then they'll also simultaneously tell you it's racist to be colorblind. But if that's the case and we're all one, then why are BAME pupils supposedly struggling because they don't have BAME teachers? And if that's the case, why? So how are white children going to fare then if the teachers are BAME? But more importantly though, this shit about reflecting the Scottish population. I don't know what this next census is going to say, but I will continue to repeat this fucking point because they continue to repeat this point for ulterior motives. The population in 2011 of Scotland was 96% white. Therefore, if the teaching profession was even 5% white, 6% white, that would be overrepresentation according to these people. Naturally, the country is going to have a much larger teaching profession that is white in comparison to BAME counterparts, but I am so fucking sick of this nonsense about proportional representation. It is not equality. Oh, 4% of Tesco's needs to be BAME. 4% of the police force needs to be BAME. 4% of the paramedic service needs to be BAME. 4% of roof tilers need to be BAME. 4% of florists need to be BAME. Why? Because 4% of the population is fucking BAME. No. So what happens when they're 5%, 6%, 10%, 15%? We keep having this conversation, or I'm talking to myself, but the point remains the same. It's a nonsense argument. And it's got to fucking stop. That does not indicate inequality because 4% of English teachers ain't fucking BAME. Oh, so what are they going to do? They're going to shoehorn in BAMEs, you know, and this was hyperlinked, you know, increase the diversity in the teaching profession, you know. Diversity in teaching, key messages. This is just fucking ridiculous nonsense, man. Improving diversity and tackling racism, because tackling racism can be achieved by improving diversity, of course. So let's shoehorn in BAMEs. You know, we need African teachers. Of course we do. We need Indian teachers because that will eradicate racism, of course. Racism continues to be experienced across all aspects of society, including education. This is some of the key points in the new report, Teaching in a Diverse Scotland, Increasing and Retaining Minority Ethnic Teachers in Scottish Schools, including racism continues to be experienced. Scotland has a target. See, this is what I'm saying. They have a target of at least 4% of its teaching workforce coming from minority backgrounds by 2030. Why? Because 4% of the teaching workforce, 4% of the population, in Scotland is BAME. So 4% of the teaching workforce needs to be BAME. So what happens when the next census comes out? You know, in fact, I actually covered this quite a while ago, this very article. And I also went through what they said in the Scottish Government's website. And there was an update, and they essentially alluded to the fact that because of the next census that's coming around, it won't be 4% anymore. It might be like 5 or 6 or something like that. So that will need to be updated. They will need to update their targets. But currently, as things stand, their target for 2030 is 4%, because 4% of the teaching staff are... No, 4%, I keep fucking saying that. 4% of the Scottish population is BAME. But anyway... up from 1.6% in 2019, which would reflect the BAME population in the 2011 national census. So there you go. Although the upcoming census will likely mean that the target will need to be revised. See, there you go again. Sorry, I'm really slow today. Sorry. There's it right there, but it did also say at the Scottish Government's website. To achieve the 4% target would mean increasing the number of BAME teachers recruited into the profession by approximately 200 per year across an initial teaching education, all teacher education providers from August 2022 to August 2030. So, Educators and leaders at all levels must approach racism as a structural issue and not just at a personal level. They're talking about teachers here. I mean, this is 101 fucking brainwashing. They want to completely mould how teachers approach this subject. First and foremost, though, before you even get into that situation, they want to bring racism to the table. It needs to be talked about at every fucking level in schools in Scotland. To recruit and retain BAME, school leaders' ability to recognise and address everyday forms of racism must significantly improve. To whose standards? Anti-racist academics, quote, quote, and the Scottish Government. Teachers must be prepared to educate and act against racism. Define racism. And school leaders must support and sponsor the progression of BAME teachers already in the workforce. Better baseline data will help to monitor progress. Every education stakeholder, from those engaged in initial teaching education to those who employ and promote teachers, to those who provide continuous professional learning, must take responsibility and play their part. Being anti-racist means acknowledging that racism exists. How fucking bold and brave, you know? Even when we do not immediately see it or understand it in our individual context, you know, they love doing this shit, you know. So like, even though it's not overtly racist, you can't see it, but it's there. They know, you know. You have to be anti-racist to figure that one out, though, you know. And proactively uncovering and countering racism wherever it exists, not just addressing racist incidents when they occur. Again, I reiterate, what is a racist incident? It's that perception. It's simply a fucking perception. Racism has changed over the years. There is still some overt and deliberate racism in society, but racism has mutated so that microaggressions and unconscious bias are now more common. I mean, how convenient is that? Racism isn't that big a problem anymore, but it's mutated, and now there's non-existent unconscious bias and fucking microaggressions. You know? Sorry for the swearing, but can you blame me? This is nonsense. This is fucking nonsense. They want to reform Scottish education to brainwash our youth because Rowena Arshad, as she's here on the screen with her fucking report, is complaining about unconscious bias and microaggressions when she goes to buy her KFC. Oh, and there's Baldy fucking Swinney, you know, it's ridiculous. Black and ethnic minority teachers continue to face structural barriers at every step of their career. Why? Because they don't get promoted enough, apparently. I mean, promotions don't grow on trees, but according to the BAME anti-racist, they should do if you're BAME. So, you know, this justifies anti-racist education and anti-racist training for all teachers, of course, because why? BAMEs don't get promoted. That's their fucking proof. Go up to any teacher in any school and ask them how many times they've been promoted, irrespective of what colour of skin they've got. And I can assure you, the vast, vast majority of them will not have had a promotion. All institutions involved in the career of a teacher, from ITE providers to schools and local authorities, should review and address the so-called non-existent barriers to supporting BAME teachers to progress and through teaching. A national offer of support with a focus on sponsorship. Sponsors do not just talent spot, but they will hold their sponsors' individuals' career vision in mind and invest in upward movement. Should be implemented to support BAME teachers at each stage of their career while structural barriers remain. Effective leadership at all levels is crucial for progress towards a more diverse teaching profession, you know, and it just goes fucking on. It's just absolute BS, like, you know. I've gone off on a tangent there, but you see what I'm saying? This is what they're doing. It's so malevolent, and it's based on nothing. Fucking nothing. Where's the proof of any of the claims that they make? The glass ceiling, the barriers, the racism, the microaggressions, none of it exists. None of it. I am so sick of these critical race theorist gurus being able to dictate governmental policy, implying that white men and white boys, irrespective of age, are the oppressors in a systemically racial country, a racist country even. It's got to fucking stop. You know? Mr. Stewart followed up by saying that Show Racism, the Red Card's chair, had written to the government to call for racism to be included in the national curriculum following an announcement about a similar move in Wales earlier this year. Adding, given that 93% of respondents to Show Racism, the Red Card's consultation said that anti-racism must be included within the curriculum, will the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the government will seriously consider that request in order to further protect children from harm? It's such cancer, because let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that racism is rife in schools. Anti-racism isn't about tackling racism. Anti-racism is about deconstructing the white identity. It comes from critical race theory. It's adopted from fucking America. It has no place in Scotland, nor Wales, nor England, nor Europe for that matter, you know, because we're different groups of people. We're Scottish, we're Irish, etc. We're not white. So how can you deconstruct an identity that we shouldn't really be fucking applying to ourselves? Nonetheless, Ms. Somerville said that one of the strands of the work of the Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education programme is curriculum reform, and it was at this point that she highlighted the need for an inclusive curriculum that delved into issues such as Scotland's colonial past. The Education Secretary was then asked for by Labour MSP Pam Duncan-Glancy if, given the incredible work of the Thai Education Initiative, which is just compulsory gay education for schools now, you know, this is where we're at now. Parents weren't given any asked for their consent on this. It's just compulsory homosexual and transgender identity politics related education. The fantastic, incredible fucking work they're doing, of course, which aims to combat homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying in schools. The government would back a similar program to tackle racism and disableism in schools. Disableism, just what the fuck. Miss Somerville said the government is looking closely at racism and all forms of bullying in schools. Importantly, it is working with young people as it considers how to tackle the problems and what the solutions might be. That is why I will be meeting young people to follow up on meetings that took place with the Deputy First Minister Baldy Swinney when he was Education Secretary. Great job he did. With the Ministers for Equality and Older People, Christina Chubcake McKelvey, that fat boot that was on about earlier, and particularly on the racism issue, to ensure that we are learning from the experiences and that they are part of our work to develop the right solutions. So essentially you're going to have brainwashed little BAMs dictating policy. Is that right? Of course that's fucking right, because that's Rainbow Unicorn Land down to a T. And on that front, I am done before I blow a brain cell or an aneurysm, whatever. Peace.